Hello, and welcome to an intro to Anthro with two humans. I'm human number one, John McCray.
And I'm human number two, John Lehr.
And this is the podcast where we reassess what it means to be human. And the title of today's episode is Dragons, Demons, and Monkeys, a Personal and Anthropological History of Addiction.
Yes. All right. Now, I feel like I should be teaching this one.
I know. Do you want to take over? Do you want?
No. Let's just co-teach it.
Okay. Well, I guess, it's no secret. We've made no secret of the fact that we're both recovering alcoholics and recovering drug addicts.
Yes.
I mean, that's no knowledge, I think.
No, that's a fact. That's been quoted. And I mean, that's the only thing that has been quoted out of our podcast and other...
In many contexts.
There's court records.
And, you and I have actually, we've written a live show called Addiction 101, which you perform around the country.
Yes, I've got one coming up. One coming up at the Betty Ford Clinic. I didn't even tell you.
Really?
This.
No.
Yes.
That's very nice.
Betty Ford is celebrating their 41st anniversary or something like that.
Wow.
And I'm their headliner. Oh,
nice.
Sorry.
Nice.
I'm their headliner.
And then also, in our, that's exciting, by the way.
Yeah.
Congratulations to the Betty
thank you.
Ford Clinic. That's actually a good thing.
Mm-hmm.
And in our series of comedic lectures that we did many years ago, we also talked about our addiction.
Yes, we sure did. Our show that started in LA was a smash hit, to our surprise.
Yeah.
And ended up going to Off-Broadway.
Off-Broadway, yeah.
New York City.
And you know what was fun about that show, or what was interesting and kind of uncomfortable at times too, is you and I were both in therapy at the time.
Yes. Yes.
We were both confronting our demons.
Yes, we were. Yeah.
And I always remember we were trying to be very authentic. That a big part of that theme of that show was being authentic and just being not trying to pretend to be somebody we weren't.
Right. Either way, by making it, hyperbolizing it or diminishing it. We wanted to kind of try to get in that pocket there. I thought we did a pretty good job.
I think so. I try not to pretend I'm anything other than I am. I think now.
Yeah. You're very, very, very humble man.
But I remember, when you do, I've directed a couple of theater shows now and been involved with a lot of theater shows. But there's always a time that comes when you're in the rehearsal process. And at some point, the cast just gets pissed off at the director.
Yes,
they just rebel. They're tired of being told what to do.
It's part of the process. They take the show on. They take the show away from the director, and it's supposed to happen. It's like when your teenagers hate you. They're supposed to. They're supposed to not hate you, but not want to spend time with you. That's what that's what you're hoping for.
Yeah.
They want to go out on the world on their own.
But like with teenagers, it can get with a cast, it can get very emotional and get very confrontational, I think.
Uh-huh. Oh, wait a minute. Where are you going with this? Are you going to bring up?
No. Yeah, we have some business we have to take care of.
Oh,
if everybody could just leave the room. If you're listening to this, please fast forward and leave the room.
We have to work some stuff out.
No. But I remember when that time, and it was just you and me. I mean, it was a cast of one.
Yes.
And best show. I mean,
a production team of one. Yeah, it was you and me in your living room.
But I remember when that happened, and we had that moment where you were like, you rebelled, and you were like, "Okay, I'm taking over the show," because you were just like tired. We had been working so hard on it. And I remember our producer was there, Lauren was there.
Oh, Lauren, Lauren. I forgot about Lauren.
And she said afterwards that was the calmest, most patient rebellion she had ever seen in a cast cast argument with the director because you and I were both in therapy, so it was all like, I hear what you're saying.
If I'm understanding what you're saying correctly.
Yeah. When you do that, it makes me feel this way.
Well, that shit works. People make fun of it. I make fun of it, but it works. It works.
But I would say thank you, therapy. Thank you, therapy.
Yes, thank you, therapy.
If you haven't tried it, please. I don't know. I think it's a wonderful thing. It really works on you if you want to figure out.
Yes, please.
So again, I would say alcoholism, addiction, and recovery has been a big part of our personal relationship. Mm-hmm. Definitely. Mm-hmm. And so I thought today we could talk about alcoholism and addiction. Mm-hmm. Not only between us, but also in the big scheme of thing for humans, how it has affected humans.
Excellent. Love it.
And first off, I want to say that, the title of this episode, Dragons, Monkeys, and Demons, is an acknowledgement of how we as humans, I think, have often dealt with our addictions. And to me, it's like, if you think of like how people refer to addiction, dragons, monkey, you got a monkey on your back, you're slaying the dragon, demon rum. I mean, these are the same metaphors or the same images that we use for mythological beasts that we use to fight.
Yes.
And I think it's probably, or even supernatural beasts. So we're fighting something that we can't see. I just found it interesting as I was putting this one together that these are things that we use those same symbols elsewhere. Mm-hmm. And, when you talk about in literature, when you talk about fighting a demon or fighting a dragon, they're existential battles. It's like
it's for all the marbles.
Right. You don't go out and like, I'm going to just go out and, talk to the exorcist doesn't go out and say, okay, I'm going to just go talk to the devil. And be like, okay, man, we're cool here. We're all good. As long as we all understand each other, we're cool here. Yeah. It's like only one person's coming back from that fight, I guess is what I would say. So first of all, John, I think we should deal with is why. Why do some people become addicts and other people don't?
Yeah. What the hell? I mean, I've always seen it just, based on my experience, anecdotal, and what I've read about it and whatnot, is it, it's like all those complicated things we always end up saying, well, a lot of it's genetic and some of it's not, or that certain genetic attributes get triggered by certain environmental situations.
Right.
Yeah. So, but I guess that goes for just about everything. That's kind of the answer to all of our behavior nowadays. It seems like we say, well, it's a combo, and depending on certain circumstances, it triggers what's already wired into you.
Yeah. I think it's, I don't know. It's much more complicated than what I think people throughout history have always said, which is like, oh, it's a question of willpower or something.
Right. And we've always, and in the show, we joked around that the only people who have willpower are people who don't need it.
Yeah. But I think, I think there has to be a genetic predisposition to addiction, probably.
Yeah.
I know my dad.
Yeah. I was just about to go to the same place, our family.
Yeah, and my dad used to always say, like, he would say, like, I wish I could just have a beer with a sandwich. But he knew that, like, he couldn't have a beer with a sandwich because once you had a beer, even with a sandwich, it was off to the races at that point.
Yeah. I always say to people, like, I'm fun for the first 90 minutes. But then it's like, where did John go and where are the car keys?
Yeah.
Usually.
Yeah. I'm the same way. It's like, I wish I could have, like, I love like all kinds of different liqueurs or wines or something from all over the world. And I wish I could just have a glass of wine or something, but I can't. I know that it's once I have a glass of wine or a beer, I'm going to wake up a few days later out in the desert with my pants off or something.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm here to tell you, you can't have a glass of wine. I've been with you.
I know. So Psychology Today, it's in an article called "Why Do We Get Addicted to Things?" An author by the name of Kanuval Sheikh quotes a woman, Maureen Boyle, at the National Institute on Drug Abuse. And Boyle says the same thing that what you just said. She says addiction is a biopsychosocial disorder. It's a combination of your genetics, your neurobiology, and how that interacts with the psychological and social factors. So again, and then Psychology Today says it comes down to a very complex array of cultural factors, social factors, and situational factors that mingle with psychological factors, biological factors, and even personal values to influence the possibility of addiction.
And that's really a scientist's way of saying we don't know what the fuck.
It's a lot of things.
There's a lot going on.
Yeah. And I think it's probably hard because you can't really predict anything off that because it's just everybody's different. So
I know, even like brothers and siblings with the same background, the same nature, nurture, twins. It's crazy.
Yeah. And I think it's hard to not only predict it, but also hard to treat it because then you have to go in and kind of treat all of those different, that combination of traits or that combination of personality. I don't know. And then you talk about like, well, what are the environmental factors that set it off?
Yes.
As well.
Yes, absolutely.
And also there, when we talk about, is there an addictive personality? And I've always thought myself that I had an addictive personality. Like there was something about me. Like if I'm going to do it, I'm going to do it all the way. You know what I mean? Whatever
that is who you are. That is who you are.
But Psychology Today again says there's no such thing. It's a myth of the addictive personality, and that's Psychology Today. I don't know. But they say there are a number of personality traits widely shared in the population that contribute to the risk of developing an addiction, usually in indirect ways. And so, in other words, there may not be a single personality trait for addiction. A person may have a combination of other personality traits such as anxiety, depression, low self-esteem, thrill-seeking, low frustration threshold that may predispose them to addiction.
Yes. I'd certainly relate to depression's a part of my story, as is thrill-seeking. That's a bad combo.
Yeah, I had a few of them in there. I could check off a few of them in there. So I think it's hard to say, but it's like if you already have that built in, and then you again, if how you confront an environmental stress or whatever it is, people will respond in different ways to it. So, but one thing that all of the researchers seem to agree upon is that when you take drugs or alcohol, it affects the brain's reward circuit. So within your brain, the National Institute on Drug Abuse says that when someone takes drugs, it causes euphoria by flooding the brain's reward circuit with dopamine.
Dopamine.
Yeah, it sounds pretty good to me. Yeah. There's a part of me that's like, okay, all right,
Give me some of that.
But the dopamine, of course, is like a naturally occurring chemical. Right. And from an evolutionary or biological standpoint, dopamine was there and is still there to make us keep doing things we need to do to survive as an individual and also as a species. So for example,
sex.
Eating.
Sex. Sex, eating. Unfortunately, we've gotten too smart. Our big brains have found other ways to trigger dopamine.
Right. And when you take drugs, I mean, we've created drugs now that will like give us that dopamine.
Yes.
When we're doing things that we don't need to be doing.
Right.
So,
That's right. It's like sitting on the couch and watching Dune. And I'm talking about the original one.
Right. Or going out to a club and dancing all night and having crazy sex. And it's like, yeah.
Or sitting in your underwear and watching cartoons.
Yeah. So what happens is these surges of dopamine in the reward circuit cause the reinforcement of pleasurable but unhealthy behaviors like taking drugs, leading people to repeat the behavior over and over again.
Makes sense.
Yeah. And then over time, of course, we develop a tolerance to it, the more you do it.
Yeah, but that's no problem. You just do more.
Just do more.
That's so what?
Problem solved. Yeah. But again, the National Institute on Drug Abuse says, the reward circuit is impaired through this tolerance that we build up.
Yeah.
And brain adaptations in the reward circuit will, quote, often lead to the person becoming less and less able to derive pleasure from other things they once enjoyed, like food, sex, or social activities.
Yes. Yep. Yep.
I was that way. I was after, at a certain time, it's like I didn't want to see anybody. I didn't want to talk to anybody. I just wanted to stay at home and get fucked up.
Well, you and I shared a certain nihilism aspect of it. That we both enjoyed just kind of diving into, I think, in our own different ways. But yeah.
Just see how far we could go and go, just keep it going, keep the party going. But there was always a time with me when the dial would be turned and suddenly it wasn't.
Yeah. I was around for that.
Yeah. Things got weird then. Things got really weird.
Yes, they did. You got this strange grin on you. But the crazy part is that's when I got excited. That's when I was like, all right, now where are we going?
We fed each other.
Here he goes.
And because this is an anthropology podcast, I just wanted to bring up another theory about possible alcoholism in humans. And that's in 2000, there was an article by Robert Dudley, who's an anthropologist, called The Evolutionary Origins of Human Alcoholism in Primate Frugivory. And frugivory means fruit eating.
Well, I'm very familiar with this. We kind of took this and we ran with it.
Yeah.
It's a fascinating theory. Fascinating.
Yes. So, like John's saying, we talk about this in Addiction 101. But what Robert Dudley is saying is his hypothesis is that there was a time when it was more beneficial for prehistoric primates to eat fermenting fruit.
Yes.
And the reason why is because fermenting fruit has more sugars and has more.
It's laying on the ground instead of up high in the tree. It tastes good because it's sugary.
Yeah. And it has more calories. And he says that humans who regularly consume alcoholic beverages may derive 2 to 10% of their total caloric intake from ethanol.
Those are my people.
Yeah.
And they're the ones who would go after the woolly mammoth. Right. Because going after a woolly mammoth, you got to be fucked up to think that that's going to work out in your favor.
Yeah.
You just got a spear and a loincloth. And it's got tusks the size of a VW Beetle, and you're like, let's get it.
Yeah.
You got to be a little wasted. Life is really hard and has been hard for human beings for, millennia. And being a little buzzed just takes the edge off. That's why they drank so much in the 1800s. It sucked.
Yeah.
It sucked. I mean, now it's better. I mean, in that way, it's better. But we still need to get our dopamine hit. Now we've invented these little phones that do it for us.
Oh yeah, that's the worst one. I think the phone.
It's the worst. It's worse than cocaine, which is really saying something. because cocaine is just the worst there is. That's the stupidest. when you hear those birds chirping at 4 a.m, oh God, it's just the worst. All your money's gone.
but the thing is, I mean, still, like, socially and culturally, you couldn't be taking out like a mirror and
right
and tooting away in your office, and yet people are, or I guess some offices, the entertainment business maybe, but people can get out their phones and get that same dopamine hit by looking at Facebook or whatever.
I have fallen down some YouTube, those shorts or Instagram reels, where you just flip one after the other before I go to bed, and I can't fall asleep because it's got me worked up into some, I don't even know what the hell it's doing to my brain, but I'm definitely feeling the effects of something.
Yeah.
It reminds me of taking drugs.
Yeah. And do you think it's like it's diminishing return on it, or so like you got to constantly be checking that thing?
Yeah. But when I'm checking it for like business stuff, or if I'm reading, or even the news, at first it doesn't affect me as much as when I'm like, it's that Instagram-y quick hit, 3 to 15 second video, that just changes that there's something, it's doing something wacky to my head, man.
Yeah. Do you find that it and we'll have to do a show on, lots of people have written about social media, but do you find that, like, in your personal life too, do you find that your attention span has changed, or do you?
I'm sorry, I wasn't paying attention.
Oh, good night, everybody. I set it up on the tee for you.
You did it. Wolfle ball. Probably. I don't know. You tell me. You what do you think? How am I doing?
I don't know. I find for myself, it's like I'm checking the news all the time.
Yeah, me too.
Like, I got to know what's going on in the world, and why I need to know what's going on in the world.
I don't know.
Every single moment.
Well, some of that's having to do with what's going on in the world, because it is the craziest of all, in recent history. And by recent history, I mean a few hundred years.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think it's important to know, but it just shows you how, I don't know, things have just sped up, and it's like you gotta keep hitting that phone all the time to keep up with what's going on in the world, or whatever.
And that's why you should settle down and listen to a nice podcast with a couple of buddies. Take it easy.
Yeah. Get some people over, gather around gather around your phone to listen to this thing.
Yep. Gather around your Bluetooth speaker like they did in the old days for a little fireside chat.
Sit back and enjoy.
Mm-hmm.
You can even binge them, like listen to them all at once.
Yes. You can listen to a different one in each ear. Burn right through them.
That sounds fantastic. We should put out that, like, if you play them backwards, there's like, it says some message.
Yes.
Or, start the addiction episode. Start the Wizard of Oz on when the music start the Wizard of Oz on the end.
If you watch Barbie, if you start Barbie from the very top, right?
And then play the addiction episode, then you'll the message, they're commenting on the addiction episode, or they're commenting on them.
Right when I say human number 2, that's when you hit start.
Okay. So then, John, so when did alcohol and drug addiction become a problem for humans? That was the other thing.
Yeah. And I think it helped. Right?
Yeah.
I mean, a lot, in terms of medicinal purposes, and like it seemed like it was a pretty amazing invention. And then it just kind of turned on you, like it does for the individual alcoholic. It works for a while, makes you confident, makes you feel a part of, and you fit in, and you can handle things that you couldn't handle, and then slowly it just kind of turns on the worm. The worm eats its own tail, and suddenly it does the opposite. And then that's when the spiral begins.
Right.
At least in my case.
No, I think Yeah, and I think historically probably people were doing it because the water was so bad.
Right.
So the water
Right.
would give you diarrhea, so you
Yeah,
wanted to
drink
have
some
like beers
wine.
or yeah.
Yeah. Absolutely. Or if you're on a ship, like I've been reading those books about guys on ships and how miserable it was. And man, if they didn't
Oh.
have their grog or whatever it was, they would mutiny. They're like, I must be buzzed all the time because it's
Yeah.
miserable on this rat infested little wooden thing where we can die any second.
Oh,
You
and the
know,
food was bad, and then
food was
they'd
bad.
always
The work was hard.
just those barrels. They talk about the barrels of water that they'd have on there, and that stale water just sitting there in
Oh,
that barrel for
oh,
3 months or whatever was.
oh,
you,
God.
had, you had to drink. You had to drink. So in his article, Alcohol, Anthropological, Archaeological Perspectives, Michael Dietler said that alcohol is currently the most widely used human psychoactive agent around the world, which kind of makes sense to me.
So sugar doesn't qualify as a psychoactive agent?
I guess not. I mean, when he's looking at actually, his article was about alcohol,
Right. Yeah.
but yeah,
Because
sugar.
I would think sugar's the only thing that's close.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
weed is coming up fast.
Oh yeah, that's for sure. It's like 7-Eleven out here in Albuquerque. It's probably even more, and
I saw a
weed
guy.
shop.
Just today, my daughter and I were driving to Trader Joe's to do a little grocery shop. There was like a middle-aged gentleman in a jogging outfit smoking a joint before he goes for his run. And my daughter goes, "That's so Californian." I go, "Yeah, it is."
I wish you had followed it. I would have loved to have had him on this episode.
Just talk a little buzz for his run.
Yeah. And Dietler says that historically, at the time of European colonization, which was like in the 1500s, there were only a few parts of North America and the Pacific that had no alcoholic drinks. So basically, everybody had kind of figured out, again, like we always talk about, that sometimes a good idea or an idea is throughout the world. It's not just one place and then everybody.
Yeah, this was a good one because it made miserable life more tolerable.
And for example, in China, there's evidence of fermenting rice and honey and fruit going back to the 7th millennium.
Wow.
BCE.
Jesus.
Yeah. And in the Middle East, there's evidence of alcohol production going back to the 6th millennium BCE. And then they also see, like, in the country of Georgia, there's wine production about that same time in the 6th millennium. And barley beer production in Iran a few centuries later. So it's alcohol's been around a long time, I guess.
Yes, it has. Wow, beer started in Iran, in Persia, huh?
Well, I mean, that's one of the places that we.
But like
there's
you said,
archaeological evidence of it.
Yeah.
So
right.
And
I always wonder how somebody figured that out. Or cheese. Cheese is a crazy one.
Yeah, yeah.
Who figured that out? I'm gonna try it. Wait a minute.
Yeah, don't throw it out.
Wait, don't throw it out.
I'm gonna eat that. Wait a second.
Really? I'm gonna put it in the stomach of the animal.
But Dietler says that, and this I'm not sure about this, but this is Dietler talking. He says it's even been suggested that that the desire for beer may have been responsible for the original domestication of cereals in the 8th millennium BCE.
I believe it. I believe it 100%. You want to get some the things that people did when weed was illegal to grow weed in their closets. Oh my God, the rigs that they invented and it was amazing. It was amazing that I saw in college, kids trying to grow it and you got to pick the flowers before this or it'll inseminate and oh my God.
Yeah. Do you think they're still growing their own? Like some people are like, nah, I like my own. I don't want to go to the store. I like my own.
I do because it's cheaper. I mean, my dad made his own wine. It was terrible, apparently. But he had his own wine. I think that was kind of a thing in the 70s. Lots of people had their own winemaking kits or something. And a lot of people make their own beer. But
did you ever try that? Did you ever try, like, as a kid, like, oh, I'm going to put some orange juice in a bottle and put a balloon on the top? And
never did. My dad did. My grandfather did it. My grandfather made huge jugs of that.
Oh, really?
There would always on their back patio be a big thing of a big jug of something with a balloon on it.
How about hooch? How about like prison hooch? You ever like, that's where you throw some fruit juice and some bread and put it in the back of a toilet? You ever do that? You ever
Never did that. No,
Drink it right out of the bag.
Yeah, I'd drink it. Why not?
Yeah.
When I was in Africa, there was a guy, my brother-in-law, and I think I told you this story. We looked up in a palm tree, and there was a guy up there with like a plastic grocery bag, just sitting there. And then we saw him, a couple of them, and we were like, what are those guys doing up there? And what they would do is they would go up and somehow rig it with a plastic bag to make their own wine, and then they just go up in the palm tree and drink it. And just lay down on the palm tree. Yeah, I never told you this.
I think you mentioned it.
Yeah, it's true. Absolutely true.
So was it like a coconut liquor?
I don't know. It must have been like I don't know, one of those not prunes, but I don't know. I don't know. It had some fruit up there that they would then jerry rig it with a plastic shopping bag, and somehow that would turn into wine, and then they would just go up there with a straw and sit up there. Get wasted.
That sounds fantastic.
It really does.
I'm surprised you didn't crawl up there with it.
I wanted to. But they were like, yeah, everybody had their, you had your tree, nobody would go, really? Everybody had their own tree.
Wow. Apparently, even by like the third millennium BCE, there was a class distinction between those who drank wine, the upper class, and those who drank beer, the lower classes. Yeah. Wow. So it was already at that time like, look at that wine snob. Ancient Egypt consumed a lot of beer. And then they say that in Europe, you already had like grain beers and mead in the first millennium BCE.
Right.
And then wine was introduced into Greece in the third millennium BCE. Huh.
Wow.
And the advantage of wine over beer was that before hops were added to beer, beer would spoil really quickly.
Okay. Really?
Yeah, so that wine you could put in a jug and seal the jug and you could ship it around the Mediterranean. But beer didn't last very long.
Okay, wow. Why? I don't understand.
I guess just no preservative in the grains themselves.
Mm-hmm.
No preservatives, and they would just go bad.
Okay.
All
right.
And then distilled alcohol, the Greeks were doing distillation in Alexandria back in the 4th century of the Common Era. So 4th century CE, which was much later that they started doing the distilled alcohol. And then Arab chemists were also distilling plants to use them in perfumes at that time.
Mm-hmm.
And then
that must have led to heroin too. That must have been when heroin was like those poppies.
Well,
imagine the first guy who like tasted some of that resin off the poppy and went, "Oh man,
yeah." Trying to walk home from work that day, it's like something's up. But they say it's kind of the same thing with drugs now. Is like they would historically they distilled alcohols to be used in medicine to kind of like treat diseases. And then somebody was like, hey, what if we just
Well, all those doctors were doing it. They would drinking their tinctures and getting wasted. Sherlock Holmes, all of them.
Then just real quick in the New World, you had, of course, like the Incans had a maize-based alcohol called chicha in the 3rd century CE. The Mayans drank a maize beer called balche.
Maize
and the
beer,
Aztecs,
corn beer.
Yeah, corn beer.
Sounds good.
Yeah, you're licking your lips.
Yeah.
For those of you who can't see him, John is like really. And the Aztecs drank a fermented agave drink called pulque. And I think you can still get pulque down.
Yeah, I bet that fucks you up.
Yeah. And Dietler notes that from an anthropological standpoint, drinking is often seen as a significant force in the construction of the social world, both in the sense of creating an ideal imagined world of social relationships and in the pragmatic sense of strategically crafting one's place within that imagined world, or challenging it.
Yeah.
And
a lot of bonding takes place over a beer.
Yeah, exactly. And he goes into talking about how alcohol, like custom or cultures throughout the world, use alcohol to kind of define relationships between people, kind of define someone's identity. And he talks about how like regional, national, and cosmopolitan identities frequently involve drinking practices.
Yeah, I wonder if our friendship would be the way it is if we hadn't have drank and partied so much. I mean,
to me, that's what I mean. That's what's kind of interesting, that our relationship survive.
Yes.
Survive that.
Yeah.
Like we're still friends. Like I feel like we went through that period of like, we had that in common, that we were like always out getting fucked up together.
Yes.
But now when we both became sober, you would think, well, are we going to maintain a friendship out of that?
Right.
Because that's a hard time
when
you first get sober.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. You feel very, everything you leaned on is different now.
Right. And
you're
I feel
different.
like
I've lived 2 lives, really. I was telling my daughter that, I got to live 2 lives.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
And it's hard when you decide to get sober and everybody else is still partying and getting fucked up, because you have nothing in common with them anymore, or you
right.
You're there and they're all drunk, and you suddenly realize, wow, these conversations aren't as interesting as what I used
know.
to think
that was one of the first things I noticed was like, at every party, there's a period where people just start yelling the same stuff at each other. It's so bizarre, but you know what I'm talking about? Like a party a party where people are drinking, usually, somewhere around midnight, it'll just flip and suddenly everybody's just screaming at each other. Well, but also you meaning the sober person also points out to other people who are questioning whether they should get sober, and you're kind of a bad reminder. You're a buzz killer, you're like, oh, Jesus, maybe I should be doing what he's doing or whatever. Mm-hmm.
But I remember being pissed off at like the sober person at the party.
Yes. Yeah.
It's like, why are you even here? Why are you even here?
What's wrong with you? I don't really have any problems with people who are sober, but people who had never tried alcohol or drugs, that always freaked me out. I was like, what's wrong with you?
Yeah. I think socially and culturally, I think you should at least try it,
Yes.
And everybody will go down their own path.
Pro-drug podcast is what we're saying.
Right.
Yeah.
Just try it. Don't let it get out of hand, but just try it. It's like,
I would stay away from heroin and meth. That one, but although they feel amazing, I don't recommend them.
The other thing that always pissed me off was also like when somebody would have just like Mary could have just like a little tiny, just part of a beer, or not even. She doesn't drink beer, like part of a wine cooler,
right?
And she'll put a cap on it and put it back in the fridge, and I'm like, I
remember early on when I was dating Jennifer, and I was, fairly newly sober. I was a couple of years sober.
Yeah.
And we went out on a date and we were having sushi, and she had some some wine and or sake or something, and I was like, we're gonna go to a movie, and I'm like, hey, yeah, finish your drink and we'll go. And she's like, oh no, I'm done. I'm not thirsty. And I remember thinking, thirsty? Thirsty?
Yeah.
What does that have to do with drinking?
Yeah. Yeah, and there's still a part of me, like, I haven't drank in years and years, but when I see that, I just like, what are you doing? Why did you even open it if you're not going to like drink the whole thing? If you're not,
I was the guy I was the guy at last call at bars when they said last call. I'd go around drinking everybody else's drinks, like a cigarette butt in it, and
yeah.
Just spit that
I'm the
out.
same way. It used to piss me off too, like when like somebody, like a person who doesn't smoke would be like, hey, can I have a cigarette? You'd be at a bar or something. Can I just have a cigarette?
No.
I'd be like, well, you don't smoke. Well, yeah, I just want to have one right now. And then you see them just taking those little baby puffs on that thing.
Yeah. God damn it. I hated that. And now with the price of because we both quit smoking too.
Yeah.
That's the craziest thing is that we both quit smoking and drinking. That's crazy to me.
Yeah.
How the hell did that happen?
And we did them at the same time, right? You did them all at the same time. Yeah.
Yep. I quit smoking before I quit drinking, which is the craziest thing ever. That's how crazy I was.
I did them all. I think I've mentioned before. I did them all like at the same time. Like quit drinking, quit doing drugs, got out of a bad relationship. And I wanted to tear my face off.
Yeah.
It was awful.
It's miserable.
Yeah.
Miserable.
It's horrible. So Dietler, to get back, Dietler lists some of the other ways that our social and cultural identities may be constructed by alcohol. And one of the things he says is that spatial distinctions. So we can segregate into separate drinking places for different groups. And I kind of think about like when going to a party in high school or going to any party, and it's always like the cool people always end up in the kitchen. For example, you know what I mean? It's like the party kind of separates out of like, okay, these are the real partiers are going to be in the kitchen.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
Let's get down to business now.
Yeah.
Let's roll our sleeves up.
Or, like the older adults, like, okay, we're going out to the garage to have our drink, everybody else is in having Thanksgiving dinner. We're all going out to the garage to, smoke a bowl or whatever it is.
Yeah.
The other thing he talks about is temporal distinctions, meaning the order of serving or timing of drinking events. So again, I think this one kind of comes down to like, okay, we're all going out to toast so-and-so. He's getting married or something.
Right.
And then the quantitative distinctions about like how much you drink. And again, that's kind of cultural because I knew a lot of Eastern Europeans in Chicago, and not saying every Eastern Europe, but there was a lot like when you drank to like, you were passed out and you did not.
That's the way I drank. I drank until I couldn't pick a glass up.
Yeah.
Or just vomiting or whatever, passed out. Yeah.
So I think there's like a cultural, you can define a culture by like how it is. I used to it was exhausting because I wanted to be as drunk as possible without appearing that I was drunk. And that was, oh God, the amount of effort at a certain point to try to pretend like you weren't drunk and just awful.
Yeah.
And then I always remembered the night before I quit drinking was the night before Thanksgiving, and I was so pissed off because everybody else had left Chicago and they'd all gone home to be with their families or whatever. Even all of the bars were closing early, and I was like so wasted still. And I still remember just going down the street like yanking on doors trying to find an open bar.
To
get into. And it was just
Chicago.
Awful.
If you can't find a bar in Chicago, something's wrong.
Yeah, that's what. Yeah, it made me want to move. Is really what.
Well, that's when you go to 7-Eleven and buy some cough syrup. Yeah,
yeah.
Which I did a few times.
Oh, really?
Because there was a few hours when Chicago bars weren't open. Like one closed, I think the last one closed at 4. There were like between 4 a.m. and 7 a.m. No liquor was served in Chicago. So we would wait for the 7 a.m. bar to open, and we'd go by 7-Eleven. I'd go by 7-Eleven, pick up a little cough syrup. They don't raise that. Yeah, in a pinch, in a pinch.
Yeah, I remember like going to a diner. You try to find an all-night diner for those 2 hours or whatever before the bar opened back up.
Oh, I worked at a 24-hour diner, and that's what would happen at 4 a.m. All these drunk people would just come in. It was the worst. The worst. They'd either tip you nothing or $50. You know what I mean? It was no rhyme or reason. It was just pure chaos.
Another thing Dietler mentions, which I think is important to our discussion, is the use of alcohol in religion. So a lot of religions will use alcohol.
Yeah.
And it was because, and not only like for communion or something, but also like as a way to commune with the divine, I guess is
right. There's a Jewish holiday. I think it's Shemini Atzeret, where it's one of them, where you're supposed to drink so much. This is for the Orthodox Jews. You're supposed to drink so much. You're supposed to drink until you don't know the difference between good and evil. So at some Orthodox synagogues out here in LA, you'll see people just wasted out of their minds, just jumping, singing and dancing, and
Well, Dietler says it's because inebriation induces altered states of consciousness, and alcohol has frequently played a prominent role in rituals of both a religious and secular nature. And I think maybe that's why when we talk about, I don't know, I'm grasping for straws here, but maybe it's because when we start talking about like slaying dragons and demons and all this stuff, is that we know that it's a link to another consciousness in a way, or a supernatural consciousness.
Yeah, I mean, I remember, I took a lot of hallucinogens, and it was never like, one person pointed out to me, and I really like this explanation. You're not inside the house of God, but you're outside looking in a window. Like you can see it. Yeah. And that's where it can be useful,
Yeah. Interesting. So moving on, is addiction a new phenomenon? And in the book, The Urge, Our History of Addiction, Carl Fisher says that the ancient Greeks had a word, philopotes, which meant a lover of drinking sessions. So we're kind of going back to the ancient Greeks here.
I was a philopotes. God damn. I philoped. Damn, did I philope.
And he says that the ancient Greeks also had a term called akrasia, akrasia, which meant weakness of the will, or doing something even though you truly believe it would be better not to. Or recognizing in the moment that you are acting against your better judgment. And I completely know this. Feeling.
I know I shouldn't be doing it, but I do it anyway. Acrosia? That'd be a good name for a band.
Akrasia.
Yeah. Akrasia. That's a good name for a band. Akrasia. Yeah. Knowing you shouldn't doing it, but doing it because you shouldn't be doing it. I even relished in doing what I knew I shouldn't be doing. You know what I mean? Like I was all in.
That moment of like, oh man, I should just go home. But no, I'm not going home.
No, that's not happening.
Yeah.
My daughter, she's coming up a lot on today's podcast, but she said to me that she said, "Dad, have you ever heard of something called dad lore?" And I'm like, "No." And she's like, those are stories that dads have that just surprise, that shock you. And she's like, "You are the king of dad lore."
Yeah. They have no idea. They have no idea what you've done.
No.
Yeah.
No. Yeah. No. Thank God. They don't need to know everything.
I was like, I've been around you and your kids. I've seen how they kind of respond to you. And you're kind of this lovable dad. But I'm like, you don't know. You don't know. And Fisher says the first term of the word addict in English was actually in the 1500s. And he says a guy named John Frith used the Latin term addicere, Addicere, which meant speak to or say to or given over to. And Fisher says that Frith was actually using that word addicere in reference to the Catholic Church and the Pope. So he was talking about addiction as something you chose to follow that was against your better judgment. So of course he was a Protestant writer at the time, and so he was saying the word addict was something that was paradoxical to it was like willed compulsion that was outside your individual control. But I thought that was interesting that it was actually used in a completely non-substance related.
The opiate of the masses, you know?
Yeah.
Religion.
And it kind of comes down to, again, this kind of we've talked about the willpower of like, you know, it's just they're not using their willpower. That's the reason why they're an addict, or that's the reason why they're making bad choices. Is they're not.
I can't tell you how many people said to me, thinking they were actually giving me advice, when they would say, "You should just stop."
Yeah.
I'm like, that's not so helpful. I don't think you understand the problem.
Yeah. I don't know. And again, it's like if you don't have an addiction, then that makes perfect sense. Like, just stop, stop doing it.
Right.
But yeah, that's not the problem.
No, that's not the problem. That means you're not an addict.
Yeah. So what were some of the other things? We talked about alcohol. We talked about what were some of the other substances that people or humans have become addicted to over history. Of course, there's opium.
God.
Yeah.
I had some opium once, a few times. And the first time you try it, you're like, oh, I see why China fell. You know, it's just like, okay, I get it.
Yeah.
I get it. And we said this in our show, but, you know, the thing that people don't understand about, you know, heroin is that they're like, but you're throwing your life away. And what they don't understand is it's worth it. It's worth throwing your life away. That's how good it feels. Like, I know I'm throwing my life away, but it's worth it.
Yeah.
And that's like the difference.
Yeah. Remember, we had that joke in the show where we said that heroin, people would still do it even if it wasn't addictive. That's how good it is. Which I always thought was hilarious.
Right. It really cuts to the core because I think people tend to focus on getting hooked on it. But what they don't seem to take into account is how amazing it feels. And that's the thing. They're not idiots, junkies. They're just, they can't come back. You just can't come back.
You know, the last time I had a really good, I went in to get a colonoscopy, actually. And that was like the last time. It was like, it makes me look forward to having another colonoscopy.
Yes.
Because it was like,
what was it they gave you? The Michael Jackson stuff. Oh God, I can't think of it. Anyway, you see why Michael Jackson threw it all away. It's amazing.
They put me out. I had and then came to like late, it was all over like a couple hours later or whatever. Yep. And it was just like, that was the best couple hours I've had since I quit drinking.
It's fantastic.
Yeah.
People say like, well, didn't you, when you take heroin, you throw up. Wasn't that horrible? And it's like, no. Not one bit. It's like going to the bathroom.
Yeah. I did. Then you had, of course, related to opium, you had laudanum, which was popular in the 1800s.
Yeah.
And laudanum was laudanum was opium mixed with water and alcohol.
Yeah.
Which was good.
And then would you drink it or would you inhale it or what would you do with it? I guess you'd shoot it?
You would drink it. It'd be like they would sell it everywhere. Like they sold laudanum over the counter. Like
poppers.
Like groceries. Yeah.
Remember how you could get poppers everywhere? at record stores.
Yeah. But it was the same way. You could go into it like you could go in and just, at the grocery store, they give it for a cough or menstrual cramps. They'd also give it
cure-all.
They give it to babies, which I always loved too. Like you would have children's cordials that would, it was basically laudanum, but that was just like if your kid was a little cranky, a little colicky, but really it was just like if your kid was up and you wanted them to be quiet for a while.
Night.
You would give them laudanum, basically.
My mom gave me a hot toddy when I was a kid for a cough.
Really?
Yeah.
Put a little whiskey in there.
Yeah, whiskey and honey and hot water and lemon. And yeah.
I was in England one time and I had a toothache, and the people I was staying with, who are English, they dipped a Q-tip in whiskey and told me just to bite down on that there where my tooth, like to kind of like let the whiskey numb my toothache.
Yeah, it'll work.
Yeah. And I was just like, as a drinker at the time, I was just like dipping that. It still hurts. Yeah. I was just dipping that Q-tip in there all the time. I came across a Scientific American article in June 1855 that was talking about the improper use of laudanum. So this is in 1855. And the author of that Scientific American was saying, the use of this preparation of opium is becoming fearfully prevalent among the female sex of our population. So women,
ladies love the laudanum.
Yeah, they were just always, I guess it was a problem. 1855, they already realized that, hey, man, people are really drinking this stuff.
Yeah. Well, it was miserable being alive. Yeah. Everybody died young and,
probably the most famous laudanum addict was a guy named Thomas de Quincey, who wrote a book in 1821 called Confessions of an English Opium-Eater.
Yes. Yes. I'm familiar, thanks to you.
Yeah, and he hung out with like Samuel Taylor Coleridge and all the other romantic poets of the time who were all doing laudanum. And apparently he's one of the first guy, forget William Burroughs. They think that De Quincey was like one of the first junkie authors. Like he wrote that book kind of talking about being a junkie. And the thing about him is they always say, he's supposed to be writing about how bad it is, but he makes it seem so good it makes you want to do laudanum.
Right. That. Well, there was a very famous improv guru in Chicago named Del Close, who was a junkie, and I was at his house, and he was quitting heroin, and his mode of quitting heroin was to eat opium. So he had a hunk of opium and was eating it like a candy bar. And that was my first experience with real opium, because he broke off a piece and said, here you go. We talked improv a little while, and then we went back and smoked that opium. And I was just like, holy moly. I found it. I found the answer.
Yeah. It was, it seems like there's always a way to, like, the way to like cure alcoholism was morphine. the way to cure morphine addiction was cocaine. The way to cure cocaine was opium. It was like just a cycle of people treating things.
Because quitting stuff sucks. It sucks, and you want something to ease the pain.
Yeah,
but you can't. The only way out is to embrace the pain. You have to let the pain flow, and it
hurts.
It hurts.
Like a nerd.
It hurts.
But I don't know. I got into the pain as well after a certain point of like, I'm just
me too.
And yelling through the whole thing.
Yes, that was it. That was the thing for me. When I was quitting smoking, everybody said, "How did you quit smoking?" And I said, whenever I wanted, I didn't throw any cigarettes away. I didn't flush them down. I left the cigarettes right by my bed because I knew I could get them. It wasn't that, And every time I jonesed for a cigarette, I would borrow a cigarette from somebody, light a lighter, and hold it as close to the tip as I possibly could.
Yeah,
and I'd be shaking, any avoidance it's not going to take you home. You got to just go right into the teeth of the dragon.
So in the early 1800s, of course, we had opium, and then in 1898 they came up with heroin, which was a derivative of morphine. So it actually went opium, and then they created morphine from opium, and then heroin from morphine.
Yeah.
And morphine is supposed to be 70 times more powerful than
opium.
Yeah.
I've had some morphine.
Yeah.
I remember once I was in the hospital, and Jennifer, my wife, had severe stomach pains, and she has a low tolerance for pain, so she's shrieking, and they finally give her some Dilaudid. And they gave her like a half a hit of Dilaudid and then set the syringe down. And I was like a few years sober at this point. They sent the syringe down, and then the nurse left. It was just me, Jennifer, and a half
really real. Right?
Oh my God. I was just looking at it going, this is ridiculous. And Jennifer's like, it feels terrible. And I'm like, no, that's not terrible. That's good.
Yeah.
You're absolutely wrong.
And they talk, the syringe, you mentioned the syringe, and that seems to be like, that was really kind of helped morphine take off back in the 1800s, is when they created the hypodermic syringe.
Yeah.
And apparently opiate use was really increased because of all the wars that were
Civil
going
War.
on in the 1800s.
Yeah.
And they would call, like, the morphine addiction became known as the army disease after the Civil War, because so many people were addicted to it.
Yeah.
And then, of course, cocaine became popular in the late 1800s. And again, it's always so strange to me, like how people would. Sigmund Freud said that it wasn't addictive,
right?
Right.
That was one of the things he was wrong about.
Yeah. I mean, there's many things, but that one always sticks out to me. Well, you're doing it a lot, Oh, it's great. It's great.
Yeah. No, it's very helpful.
And then also, ether. Drinking ether. But not only inhaling it, but drinking ether became very popular in Northern Ireland in the 1800s. Yeah. And the reason is that there were high taxes on alcohol. So then there were low taxes on ether. So then people started drinking ether.
Ether. My God.
Yeah. And one of the big proponents of it was a guy named Dr. He was a guy named Dr. Kelly, who he took a pledge to stop drinking, an anti-alcohol pledge. And his way of dealing with it was drinking ether. So he felt like he wasn't breaking the pledge if he drank ether.
Well, that's how I quit smoking cigarettes. I just smoked weed, tons and tons and tons of weed. And it helped.
I'm not smoking cigarettes.
Nope.
Kicked it. Easy as that.
Kicked it. Done.
They said also what was great about ether for people that were drinking ether at the time was like you would be really screwed up out on the streets, and by the time the cops picked you up and got you back to the police station, you were completely sober.
Right. It would move through you pretty fast.
Yeah.
It's kind of like doing nitrous oxide, it'll hit you, but it leaves pretty quickly.
Yeah. So I'm sure the cops were like, what? He's completely sober. Like they go into like,
how many fingers am I holding up? Why, 4? God damn it.
Like they're dragging you in, like you can't even stand.
Officer, please.
Just so frustrating to them. It's like disappearing ink, you know what I mean? So then finally, John, just to get at some of the miracle cures, which I think were probably the worst.
These are great.
In the book Slaying the Dragon, The History of Addiction, Treatment, and Recovery in America, William White, who, very nice guy, we've communicated with William White by email.
Yes, we have.
he goes into detail about all the cures that came up, and it seems like people were always coming up with miracle cure. Everybody wanted like a silver bullet, something that would just stop the addiction.
Well, they're addicts. I mean, they wanted a silver bullet for dealing with life, and now they want a silver bullet for getting rid of the thing that they thought was going to help them deal with life.
Yeah. So one of the most famous ones is Dr. Leslie Keeley's double chloride of gold remedy.
Oh.
And
they shot gold into people.
Yeah, well, at one time, I mean, they think that early forms of the formula actually had gold in it.
Jesus.
But who knows what he was putting in it later. Like apparently he would franchise his clinics. And if you signed on, if you're a franchisee, you had to sign a non-disclosure agreement saying that you wouldn't reveal what was in the formula, which makes me think that God only knows what was in the formula.
Yeah. And 2 drops of urine. What? Yes.
And so, but at that time, to say gold, like gold anything, was like the gold standard.
Right. The gold, it's expensive, therefore it must work. Yeah. It's brilliant. It's brilliant.
And so people would come down to the Keeley Institute, which was in Dwight, Illinois. And I always found it interesting that when all of these alcoholics came down there, Keeley didn't provide like a dormitory or anything for him. He didn't want them on his property, you know.
Right.
Like, so they had to stay with local people in the town, and then like 4 times a day they would walk over to the Keeley Institute and get shot up with this double chloride of gold.
Jesus.
Yeah.
Jesus.
And some of the other one that was kind of interesting to me was in the 1800s was kind of like when people were coming up with antibodies and coming up with like different medicinal vaccinations for people. And one of them was, usually they would use an animal's blood. So for example, the diphtheria antitoxin was developed from horse's blood.
Right.
So another one of somebody was like, well, maybe if we give a horse alcohol, we get a horse drunk.
Make the horse an alcoholic.
Yeah.
Then out from his blood, we'll make a concoction that will then put into people's bloodstreams.
Right.
Jesus Christ.
And it kind of made sense to people, with kind of like limited scientific medicinal, like, oh, okay. I'm just like, how much alcohol do you have to give the horse, dude?
Yeah, a lot. If you've ever been to Tijuana, you know what I'm talking about.
There was all, you could buy these anti-alcoholism tinctures, or you could buy all these medicines to stop alcoholism, even through Sears Roebuck catalog.
Yeah.
There was also something called the White Star's Secret Liquor Cure that came in a box of 30 capsules. And again, what William White says that the main ingredient in the White Star's Secret Liquor Cure was cocaine. I feel great. I quit drinking.
The edge off.
Great. Yeah. And one of the most frightening cures I think that I read about them were the cures that were marketed to the spouses of the alcoholic.
Yeah.
And the thing is, these were cures that you would drop into the alcoholic's coffee
without him knowing
food.
It. Yeah.
Right. And that just seems terrifying to me, because the hallucinations, or like just how awful you feel when you're getting sober.
Yes.
And not know that you're getting sober.
Right.
Is just terrifying to me. Like, I understand the purpose of it, of like, well, you'll just make your husband better, or your wife better. But it's like,
well, the
how
dishonesty
cruel and horrible that is.
Yeah.
All right, John. So we could go on talking about addictions for hours.
Yes, we could.
But I will say, if people want to hear more, they'll have to come see Addiction 101.
Yes.
When you go into more detail.
Or check out our reference lists, because, all of these, Professor McCray reads all these books. And we have a very detailed reference list that's for if you go to our Podbean page, or if you go to our YouTube, you'll see them. We post them all in there. This is a very well researched. It's amazing what you do. Really is.
It's that compulsive energy that I used to use for partying is now used for just like
a podcast. Good. Yeah. Good.
So John, I guess I will say, and you've mentioned it before too, like I don't regret anything I did before. I don't think. Right. Like I was, I'm glad I was a drunk. I'm glad I'm not a drunk anymore. It's just, and you've mentioned it where you say, like, you meet people who are like, I wish I had done something else, or I wish I had done such and such. And I don't. I feel like I did it all myself.
Me too. So. It's like you run into people who say, God, I wish I had, sowed my oats more in my 20s or something. And I'm looking at them going like, not me. I don't.
Yeah. I will say I had a lot of fun, and I'm glad I'm not having that type of fun anymore.
Yeah, I guess. And I'm glad we're alive, because so many people we know weren't and didn't. And boy, I don't know why we're the ones that are still alive, but I'm glad we are. Yeah.
And I will say, like, for anybody who's struggling with addiction or has an addiction or is recently recovered, it sucks, but you're not alone. I guess I would say is like there are people there who are going through the same thing, who have gone through the same thing. So just
hang in.
We're all in this together.
Yep. Just keep doing it. Just do the next thing in front of you.
And honestly, life is weird being sober. It's really. Yeah. It's much more fucked up being seeing life.
My God.
Sober.
Stone cold sober. What about sex? Stone cold sober. Oh. The first time I had sex, I was just like, what? What do I do?
Yeah. What do we do when it's over?
Do we talk? Like what?
Yeah. I don't know. Glass half full. You can still find weirdness in life.
Oh yeah. You never know. You might find yourself doing an anthropology podcast with your bestie.
Yeah.
You never know.
See what happens when you quit.
All right. Well, this is human number 2. Signing off. Sorry.
And this is human number 1. Thank you so much for joining us, everyone. I hope you enjoyed this podcast. If you did, please tell a friend about it, because you know what? I would love to open an Intro to Anthro clinic, kind of like the Keeley thing, like an institute. Intro to Anthro Institute. Where listeners and fans of the show, you could come and stay for 4 weeks and just come to lectures and kind of hang out. We won't shoot you up with gold or anything, but I mean, you can kind of hang out and everybody we play games and
I love that idea. We need a little Intro to Anthro retreat.
Yeah.
That's a good idea. I like that.
So we need to get sponsors now, because I'm thinking like the full bit, like the Keeley Institute. I'm talking about like a full building where people can come. Yeah. And we'll let you say, we'll have dormitory or like casitas or something where people can stay.
Yeah. That sounds lovely.
Yeah. All right, everyone. Thanks for listening. We love you, John.
Thanks. All right. Talk to you soon.
All right. Talk to you later. Bye.
Bye.